the Funnel Reboot podcast with your host, Glenn Schmeltzley. Let's get into today's show.
Hey, Glenn here. Welcome to Funnel Reboot. Going to be a solo cast episode today, bringing you some information on the massive transition off of Google's old Universal Analytics and onto GA4. You may have heard me saying my key focus has been migrating B2B companies to the new platform. And in my day job, we have consultants doing transition work for clients. They're also done in the form of private workshops. And in the show notes, there will be a link about the cities where those GA Fast Forward workshops are happening. But truthfully, I'm not content leaving it there. With the number of websites that need to transition before UA's 2023 sunsetting, it's crucial to tell as many marketers as possible what they can do when they migrate to GA4. So, I'm going to give you the process that the engagements and the workshops follow to get onto Google's full analytics stack in this episode. I'll start with the steps to install GA4. If you've already done that and set up goals and linked it to the Google ads that you're running, you can skip ahead to about the 10.5-minute mark where there will be a little melodic pause. And then we'll jump past for the other 2/3 of the episode on the rest of the tools that you can use to get a complete picture of your B2B funnel. So, are you ready to merge GA4 with all of your marketing data? Then let's go. We're going to start with our site configuration. This is referring to the tag script that is sitting on our website that actually connects to everything in Google's ecosystem. If you have a modern tag, you are probably going to see gtag or gtm.js. If you don't know what these things mean, don't worry. You don't have to be sure about it, but you should speak with the person who set up the existing script on your site and confer with them. But presuming that we have a modern script on our website, not ga.js, not analytics.js, then we can go ahead and run the GA4 setup wizard. We're going to do that by making sure that we're logged in to the admin account that we use on Universal Analytics. Then, after we've completed the setup wizard, take a day, and we should then be able, when we log in, to go and see some data inside of our GA4 property. Another step that's wise to do when you're in that admin area of your GA4 is to review the settings. One of them that's really important and often missed is data retention. Go ahead and look in there. If it's set to 2 months, you should go in and change it to 14 months, which is the longest that is allowed within the GA4 interface. It's not the longest allowed, period, but we'll come back to that. If you're wondering whether it's okay to run the Universal Analytics alongside of GA4, it's absolutely encouraged. Many run both platforms in parallel, and if you're listening to this before July of 2023, this is the way to go. You want to bear in mind also that you shouldn't leave your setup of GA4 for too long because data only starts collecting from the day that you set up that property. When you log into Google Analytics 4, a common thing that's heard is that it's pretty sparse. And some would even say that the interface is kind of clunky. To be honest, I'm not going to fight that, but I'm going to encourage you. Remember, this is a platform that is similar to what Universal Analytics was in its early days. So we got to give it time. But we do also have to remember that Google is in a completely different place competitively today. In the early 2000s, they were just another company with an analytics product. Today, they have market dominance. Their setup for GA4 isn't aiming to get every small to medium business on their platform. Remember, they're giving it away for free. However, when I look around at the wider ecosystems out there, I have to say that GA4 and the other parts of its platform have an ability to handle the complexity of modern B2B marketing that other platforms just can't match. It's also set up primarily by Google engineers. And for marketers out there who are frustrated, remember that those developers usually only interact with other developers. They don't interact with marketers, and they don't know what marketers need. A couple things that are different about Google Analytics 4, its data structure, and that you will notice when you start to look at reports that you're used to seeing. It isn't worked around sessions. This is because the platform was primarily built for using with mobile apps. And most businesses, even though they're not yet there today with having a mobile app, Google is trying to make sure that they are future-proofed. The one thing that sites and mobile apps do have is events. Sessions are mainly a metric that matters when you have pages. I'm looking at the home page. Now I'm looking at the product page. Now I'm looking at the contact page. But in a world where you are in a perpetual scroll, or you are on an app which is always logged in, the idea of a session just doesn't fit. So this is why the product that is now known as Google Analytics 4 was built around that. In fact, that's its whole data model, is it is looking at the events that people do, not whether they are on a certain page or moving through a session. Springboarding from events, let's talk about conversions. A conversion is an event that you consider to be extra important to your business. This is something that Universal Analytics had. They called it goals, but it's the same thing. The difference in GA4 is that it always knows what an event is. Universal Analytics didn't. And when you had event-based conversions, Universal Analytics would need you to tell it what the parameters of that conversion were. Not so in GA4. All it needs is to know which event you're talking about. So if we can make something an event, we can make it a conversion. Google Tag Manager will have a good part to play for some of the more involved actions on your website, because Google Tag Manager can create events, even if Google Analytics 4 doesn't spot them off the bat. While these are good pieces of news for B2B companies, there are still some structural problems. B2B companies, even though most people are starting on the internet for their purchase research, B2B is very far away from revenue. And this is particularly true when it comes to paid media. There are some good things that can be done in analytics. Google Ads, for example, can be tied in tightly to a Google Analytics conversion, so that if you're looking to get Google Ads looking for the kinds of audiences that will not only click the ad, but those that will fill out the form on your website, you can create a loop where you are cycling back that information about the individuals that completed the form on your website and bring it right back into Google Ads to train its algorithm. This is called importing, and you get the chance to import them as a primary or a secondary kind of conversion. Google Analytics 4 can sometimes be the only piece you need, together with Google Ads, to tie these two together. You do want to make sure that if you're setting this up, that you make the link between your Google Analytics 4 and your Google Ads the only link that is feeding conversions back. If you leave the link that has Universal Analytics conversions feeding into Google Ads, you'll be double counting, and you don't want to do that. This type of cycle where things are leaving an ad platform, going onto a website, possibly into later systems, and then being fed back into the ad platform isn't unique to Google Ads. You should consider doing it with other platforms. LinkedIn ads, Microsoft Search, Twitter, etc. I like to think of this as a salmon. They spawn upstream and then they go down and grow and then they move back upstream to spawn again. The best thing that you can use in your arsenal for doing this is when you begin on those non-Google platforms, please use UTM parameters in the URLs for each one of the ads that you're sending. That's going to be what's going to provide a chain in addition to the upstream import that happens. The upstream import's going to be done thanks to Google Tag Manager. You can embed the pixels or other tags that those platforms have, and then whenever you trigger that conversion, you can tell Google Tag Manager to send that information back to that ad platform. And of course, there's not just one ad platform working at a time. Many of us work in a multi-touch world. Now we get into asking, well, how efficiently do the different channels work? We have a bit of a tension here. The tactics that are used lower down in the funnel, you want to optimize for profitable sales. What you want at the top of the funnel is usually a lot of traffic and, importantly, conversions. But joining these together is really difficult when you've got multiple sources and multiple sales touches. And this is where we can step beyond with Google Analytics 4 from just having the data inside of that interface. We can actually progress to having a database that holds all the cost information, holds the revenue-related information, and allows us to see about putting them together. This, I like to think, is a way to cut through the data, see the whole funnel. You can almost think of it like if that original problem of knowing where your marketing money is being well spent is like a Gordian knot, you can just come along and cut it right down the middle with a sword, as long as you've got all of your marketing data in a format that it can be used. And that's what a database is going to do. It's going to allow you to find a straight line relationship to profit from all of this data that you have that's been locked up in various silos. So I hope that you come along with me on the next part of this journey to use this analytics upgrade as your chance to get what you really want from your analytics. Insights on how to improve your customer acquisition. And if you're still doubting whether or not you should do this, just ask yourself whether manually pulling the data for the reporting that you do still makes sense. David Crevitt, a well-known expert in this field, says that era is over. Inputting data is not the way you want to do it. Extracting data for each time you need to answer something or find a report, that's not the way to do it. The way you want to do it is to have automated data flows into a database and then be able to ask any question out of that database or have any kind of visualization built out of that database that goes and grabs the freshest data. So if we're ready, let's dive in. What do we need to do this? The main thing I'm going to suggest, because we're in the Google ecosystem, is Google Cloud. What's Google Cloud? To me, it's just a big collection of various tools that Google has that allows you to get access to them without needing a server. And what I actually think it represents for most marketers is a technical leap forward. Because, frankly, it just wouldn't be economical using human effort to do the sorts of things that you can do with Google Cloud. You can think of it as a place to store first-party data, and that's becoming more and more precious these days. But I also want you to think about it being a place where you can combine that data and upcycle the first-party data. What you're going to do at this point is you're going to set up a Google Cloud account. They let you do it in what they call sandbox mode. And you can go to cloud.google.com and follow that setup, answer a few questions, and you have an account. Now that account doesn't allow anyone to have access but you. So later on, you're going to need to widen it and you're going to need to go into IAM, which is their privacy and access management module, and start to allow other people to have access. And you're also going to need it to tell Google Cloud that outside platforms can send data into the database that you're going to have inside of it. But once you have a cloud account set up, you're going to go into its main database tool called BigQuery. BigQuery is simply a database which will allow queries in the form of SQL to ask questions of any data that's in there and for it to be fetched and brought out. And those questions can not only be asked by a person typing, but they can also be asked by other tools in the Google ecosystem. I'll provide some information in the show notes, but if you want to see some of the information in BigQuery, you can go and look at the Google Demo Database. BigQuery is wired to receive data from Google Analytics 4 for free. So you can then go through that process. To start that process, you're going to go into your GA4 admin. And if you look at one of the bottom options on Properties menu, you'll see BigQuery links. You click in there, give it some information to create the link, and that's going to create what's called a BigQuery project. You will then need to go back into Google Cloud and set up permissions for GA4 to talk to it. When you're done that, you'll come back to Google Analytics admin area and you will see a project sitting in the link table with a project number. At this point, you need to wait for 24 hours. I've usually seen it take exactly 24 hours. But after 24 hours, if you've set it up for a daily extract, you will see data from the day before in a table in BigQuery that is all of the events that happened according to Google Analytics. So it's the same information that you get in the GA4 interface, but now it's in a database. And now you have it working for you in sandbox mode. And Google gives you the first 60 days to use this data in sandbox mode without even putting in a credit card. But GA4 isn't going to be the only system that you're going to set up to BigQuery. You're going to start to get into your other external systems. Because in B2B situations, the most important activity sometimes takes place outside of Google Analytics' purview. The analytics data can be used to augment our understanding of what's going on, but it's not the sole platform that tells us how things like our paid media or our organic content are working for us. To quote a good friend of mine, Jim Kane, the second you decide to take something like Google Analytics seriously and bring it into decision making, you start realizing, oh crap, we use Salesforce and we use Pardot and we use an email cloud, and well, we actually need that data directly connected with Google Analytics. How do we connect those things together? Well, there's a specific technology that you need to use, and it's called ETL. And ETL is really important for talking, for example, to your marketing automation platform. What we're talking about is bringing marketing automation data into your BigQuery database. Yes, there may be information going the other way. Marketing automation systems do have hooks to receive information from your ads, from your analytics. And I'm not here to explain why they aren't natively giving this functionality away or always want to play nice with giving the information. That's for them to say. But I simply believe that your chance to successfully report your entire funnel is better when you're accessing the raw data in a database versus trying to rely on any one vendor. So how do you do that? Well, there's a couple of platforms out there, paid platforms. You might have heard of Fivetran or Supermetrics or Stitch or Hevo Data or Funnel.io. Doesn't really matter which one you choose, but the setup's going to be the same for all of them. Once you set up an account with them, you need to set BigQuery as a destination because ETL is always about getting stuff from A to B. And in between, it's transforming the data. So the beginning part is extract, the last part is load, and that middle part is transform. And that's important because they keep up with the APIs that the vendors of the marketing automation systems and the ad platforms change. And they do change them. So having a paid vendor who worries about those things so that your data doesn't break when it's moving across over the weeks and months and years that you use this is a sound investment. The main thing that you're going to need to obtain when you're setting up BigQuery as a destination is you need to find your key in Google Cloud. You'll need to go generate it, and then you'll need to provide it to the ETL provider so that they can authenticate and get their tool talking with your BigQuery database. Those tools usually have an overnight batching process. So you're going to set them up and then you're going to wait overnight and then go back into BigQuery and you'll start to see your information. The marketing automation tools are useful for this. They'll bring in information about your contacts that became qualified leads, marketing qualified leads, sales qualified leads perhaps. If we swivel around to the ad channels, that's important because they're going to give you some great information at a detailed level about not only the campaigns that you have, but perhaps the individual ad sets or groups and even the individual ads and sometimes the terms that triggered those ads, along with the price that you paid for them. These are all important parts, and they're particularly important when you think about how the platforms are pushing to receive your bids in a cost of acquisition or a ROAS. So you'll need to be able to know how much you are paying for those that become a marketing qualified lead, which is what you really care about, for you to even set that bid amount. And that's important if you want to stay competitive in the auction. So the ad platforms are certainly eager for this information. You should also be eager for this information. And I know sometimes people hate on the ad platforms, but if we step back, I believe the real enemy is not an ad platform. The real enemy has been us making guesses with a lack of data that causes us to gamble with our company's money. What we want to instead do is make changes, small adjustments, maybe experiments with our bidding processes, knowing how much prospects that we're getting for our advertising are worth to us. And we can only do that by going through this exercise of combining our data. B2B leadership will also need to see that kind of information. That's going to interest them far more than looking at a run-of-the-mill analytics report. I'm not suggesting that we write queries to get this information. There's an excellent tool that's going to help us here to visualize the data. It's Looker Studio, formerly known as Google Data Studio. Why am I bringing up yet another product, you ask? Well, I'm going to refer you to my friend Jim Stern about that, because he said, looking inside of a Google shop that's tied into the Google ecosystem, yes, there's incredible value being in that realm. But it's as long as there's recognition that you collect the data with GA4 and you analyze it in BigQuery and you report it out through Looker Studio. He said, if you understand that, you're going to be fine. So are we saying that Looker Studio is made for marketers and not necessarily data analysts? Yes, in a word, because they're the end users who need to report the performance of the money that is being spent inside of these campaigns to their clients or to their bosses. But it's not as hard as you think. A couple things to know about Data Studio or Looker Studio. It's a WYSIWYG editor, so you get to pivot between seeing it as the reader sees it or how you edit it. That's a really handy feature. Its ability to read from multiple data sources is huge. It has over 800 connectors that allow you to talk to different outside data sources. And of course, the most popular ones that you're going to look at are going to be BigQuery and possibly Google Sheets or a third-party data source. And if you want to see why Google is so committed to this do-it-yourself reporting engine, all you have to do is look at the GA4 interface. They have a smaller version of it called Explore Mode, where you can save reports. But it's a really light version of the capabilities of Looker Studio. And even though Universal Analytics gave us a lot of canned reports, look at everything that Google has been doing. It's pretty clear to me that they're continuing to move in the opposite direction from what they had with UA. Once you bring a data source into Data Studio, you're immediately asked which of the data pieces are dimensions for your report and which ones are metrics. A dimension is something that you want to divide by. It is the category of something, and the metric is obviously the actual number that can be counted and sliced and diced by as many dimensions as you have. Think of it like a pivot table. Once you bring these in and you start moving them around and you start to decide that you want to make a different kind of chart, it's really easy in Data Studio. You just click on the type that you want and instantly the way that your data looks changes. You can even change date ranges Two types of date ranges it has are absolute date ranges with fixed dates and relative date ranges like last week or last quarter. Once you get a little farther along beyond one data set, you'll want to try to use more than one data set. Or you might want to allow drill downs on the data within your data set. It has filters that allow you to do that. And then when you're ready to progress to what we've been talking about all along, you can bring multiple data sets together. And when you have a common field, such as an identifier for a form submission in GA4 and the identifier in your marketing automation suite for the same conversion, then you can join those two and use what Data Studio or Looker Studio calls a blend. And then you can bring in data from either one of those sources and mishmash it any way you want. There's even the capability, if you want to get more granular than that, to put SQL script into Looker Studio and have it go to BigQuery, pull that data in, and render it for you on the spot. It's a really powerful tool. Some of the other capabilities that you'll want to make use of in time will be gathering together reports so that they can be sent out by PDF, sent out by email, or sent out as links. And those are links to the live reports. And there are even capabilities to make scheduled email reports if some Google Apps script is applied. So if you want to turn the current status quo of getting out reports and always being asked, well, what is the overhead of marketing good for our company? This allows you to come back to your management team and give them information that's math-based, that links marketing numbers to the numbers that your business really cares about. GHX's Scott Kelly said it this way as a non-marketer. I want to know the math behind plans to generate a specific amount of sales. And I want that information as the underpinning of the performance metrics that we track to align our salespeople to their territories and quotas and incentives. So whether you're going to be using this data to notice areas of waste in your spending and cutting out 10, 20 or more % of your marketing cost because you now see where you're wasting, or if you just want to get a grasp of how much you are paying to acquire a customer and how much revenue they are bringing in and putting those two puzzle pieces together to see the whole picture, all I've hoped to do today is to inspire you to figure out how you can get further along into what I believe is the next generation of marketing analytics. And I hope that this has helped you, and I would be glad for you to reach out to me to answer any questions that you have. And of course, I hope that there's been something in what I've said today that gives you better insight into your funnel to make it even better.
Thanks for listening. Follow the show on Twitter at Funnel Reboot. If you like what you have heard today, please consider leaving a review wherever you get your podcasts.